Freddy's Brooklyn Roundhouse, where we turn the train around. Ooh, it's Freddy's Brooklyn Roundhouse. Send that train back out of sound. It's the train of eminent domain.
Atlantic Yards Photographers' Rights Mobilization, Sunday, February 10th, 2008.
A San Francisco videographer had been staying about a block from the Ratner Malls, and as she was walking through the neighborhood, she saw a lot of signs that said "Stop Atlantic Yards" or "No Atlantic Yards," and so she wanted to know what Atlantic Yards was. And a couple people had told her, so she was sort of interested in seeing what's there. And so she just went, and really mostly to take what she calls arty footage of the rail yards. And while we were out there today with a group of photographers, we saw an MTA cruiser. Passed by several times. So, a cruiser just came by and she was being questioned. And the questioning was not only about what are you doing there, but the MTA cop also implied that, wanted to know what organization she was with, and it implied that, that this project was going to go forward. So it also, it really, whether or not his actions were absolutely illegal or just bordered on illegality, I mean, that's another question.
A video artist and teacher visiting from California was detained and questioned by an MTA officer while she was photographing around the Atlantic Yards footprint on Sunday, February 3rd. Attempts were made to confiscate her camera, and specific references to the Atlantic Yards project were made.
The story made the news. It was in the Brooklyn papers. It was broken on Atlantic Yards report by Norman Oder. And so we a bunch of photographers came out today, and we invited her down, and it was a chance to meet her and learn a little bit more about her story.
We decided to come as a group. Hey guys, hold on. Here's the reason why we're here.
Here we are at Freddy's back room in Brooklyn in the footprint, and we're here with Catherine McGinnis, who's a visitor to our lovely borough from San Francisco. And Catherine, is this your first time in Brooklyn?
No, it's not. I have lots of friends here and there in Brooklyn, so definitely the most extended visit.
And you're a photographer?
Photographer, video artist, teacher, many hats.
Why don't you tell us about your experience here during your visit and what happened to you specifically while you were doing your photography in the footprint?
Well, I was staying about literally just a block away from the footprint when I first got here, staying with some friends, and one of the first things I noticed were signs in all the windows saying no Atlantic Yards, no stadium, and I asked my friends, like, what's this thing that everyone seems so mad about? And they were like, oh, they're going to build a huge stadium right where the rail yards are, right in the next block. And so maybe a week later, I was walking around. It was a Sunday. It was beautiful. It was 50 degrees. It was total California weather. And so I walked around. I walked actually, all over Brooklyn. I did this long, crazy walk. And I walked by the rail yard, stopped and took some photographs. And I was actually standing in front of these metal gates that have lots of graffiti on them. When an MTA cop in a car stopped, and I actually had my iPod on, so he actually was yelling at me for a little while before, for a minute or two before I turned around, and there he was. And he wanted to know what I was doing, gave me the kind of 9/11 talk, which I understand, and which I understand. And I said, thinking that I was helping to make matters more clear, said that, I thought these are the rail yards that are they're going to build a bunch of buildings here. This is all going to go away. Trying to make it clear that I didn't think I was, shooting something that was going to be like a, make for good terror.
So just to get this straight, you were walking around the footprint. You're a photographer. You're taking photographs of an area that you believe is going to be changing.
Mm-hmm.
And what did the 9/11 speech comprise? Just issues of security?
Yeah, it was just, I was actually shooting video at the time, and so they were saying like, oh, there are people who are out to get us, and there are people who are out to kill people here, and they're videotaping, and so we have to check everybody who's videotaping. And I was very clearly on the sidewalk, and he asked me what I was doing, and then started asking to see my camera, that he needed to make sure that it was off. And I was actually putting it away at that point, so it was a little ridiculous. But really asked repeatedly to see my camera, at which point I was like, I'm sorry, it's, the best of my understanding, I don't actually, I'm, within my rights to say no. And at that point, he was very much like, you're not cooperating, I'm going to need to see some ID, you're behaving suspiciously, and all of these sorts of things.
So it sounds like he was trying to intimidate you and harass you, and when you were trying to put your camera away, did not believe that you were trying to put your camera away. Were you asked for ID?
I was asked for ID. Yeah, I think he wanted to look at at my videotape. Yeah, and I mean, clearly, because, you can tell when the camera's off. And when it's away, even if it's not off, like it might as well be off. So, I mean, I think definitely, like, he wanted to look at.
Did he identify himself at all? Did he beyond the security concerns of videotaping in this area? I mean, did he identify himself in any way?
No, and actually later he did have, I could see the number on the car that was clearly marked MTA Police. I couldn't actually quite see his whole badge, and I did have to ask him to spell his name for me, and I had to make sure that I could get his full badge number, which he was fairly cooperative in doing. I needed to read the first two letters of his name. But yeah, he kept asking me if I was part of any organization, which was something that I really didn't understand at all.
Photographers Club.
Yeah, seriously, I was seriously listing off, I have, I'm in this art collective, and I was telling him about that, and he was, that was not the answer that he was looking for. I did give him my ID. He thought that was weird that I had a California ID. And, was kind of like telling me, like, you've moved here, you're visiting, what's going on. Then did call in and run a security check with my ID.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. No, and I waited there while he was calling in right there. And once he'd finished the security check, he gave me back my ID. Said a few more things, kind of like, oh, well, you weren't that forthcoming. We have to check everybody. And said before he let me go, he asked me, very specifically, was I a part of any organizations opposing the Atlantic Yards project? Which it kind of made clear what he meant by organization earlier. It definitely was like.
Did you feel like he was harassing you?
I definitely felt like he was trying to manipulate what I was saying and kind of trying to twist things. At some points, it was kind of ridiculous. He was, he would ask me questions and then say, "Will you, try and turn it back around on me?" And so at one point he was like, "Aha, I've caught you. First you said you taught video, and then you taught art. And then you said you teach art, which is it?" And I was like, "I teach video art," which is it's kind of funny, but it was, what does it, he kept trying to make something out of what was really nothing.
Have you had this experience or any kind of experience like this before? Anything in San Francisco similar to this happened to you?
It definitely, I mean, certainly security guards, what I like to describe as big angry men who just object to you doing anything on, it's clearly on the sidewalk. But that's more of a situation where they don't know, especially with like private citizens, like, it's not, they clearly are uninformed, misinformed, and don't know what's going on. I have had one experience with the BART police, which is the
San Francisco,
the local public transportation. But it wasn't. They were, they were like, oh, you can't take pictures. But they had their rule is the pictures have to be artistic, and so they were saying that they didn't think that what I was doing was artistic enough.
So now MTA and San Francisco BART, they're the artistic police.
There's no jail, there was no security check, there was nothing like that. It was just like whether or not they could tell us not to do it. And it was funny, it was this project that was funded by the city, and it turned out sort of a miscommunication between the two transit agencies. One of them was totally funding it and totally into it, and the other had no idea what was going on. And so they were like, what's going on? And we were like, we just got money from the city to do this. So, but that was, it was a much less it was just not anywhere near.
That sounds more like Keystone Cops as opposed to the situation we have here, which is basically this Atlantic Yards project. There has been opposition to it for over 4 years now, and the folks that are working in this area should be aware of what is happening, and they should know at this point that, folks can walk around and take photographs, especially if they're on the sidewalk in public areas. And it is a very well photographed area. It's highly documented. So there's really no excuse, I think, at this point for folks like yourself who are just visiting from out of town to be harassed for something as simple as taking out your camera and taking some, pictures.
Well, really, for anybody, on the sidewalk, and they should know, definitely, and I think that was the reason why. I think that's why there were MTA police in the area. I think that's why they were so aggressive. I think they really were, they wanted to make sure it wasn't part of any organization that was opposing the yards.
And if you were, though, you have every right to be.
Absolutely, absolutely. But that was really what they were trying to prevent. Specifically, it wasn't just a kind of like, we have to do this 9/11, post 9/11, we have to ask everybody what they're doing.
So today we went out as an organized group in support of you, and I think a lot of photographers who are getting very frustrated with the level of harassment that they feel, and a lot of them shared their stories with us today. And we walked around the footprint, and interestingly enough, nobody seemed to bother us today, right?
It was interesting. There's definitely, when we were standing in a big circle, and someone said, actually, like, at this point, okay, we are walking the sidewalk. And there was some movement, kind of to consolidate. But there was several, actually, MTA vehicles, but one in particular, an SUV that was moving around just very slowly. And it was interesting, like, they didn't stop. They didn't stop. They didn't ask. They didn't ask about the organization. I think the organization was pretty clear at that point. But it's interesting that they would be more interested in individuals than in a group.
So last week they went after yourself, an individual who was walking around the footprint. This week there were, I don't know, maybe 20 of us walking around as a group, and nobody bothered us. So it seems to me like it makes more of a case for individual harassment, and when they know a person may not be know their rights to walk and take photos within an area, it seems to me that it's a lot, they've made a point of targeting you as an individual versus knowing that a group of folks, somebody probably within that group knows their rights.
I think that they're probably on their best behavior today. I know that Norman called the PR department of the MTA last Monday and detailed the incident, and they were going to get back to him with a comment, but to my knowledge, they have not yet responded. So I think that they know, and I would assume that they know that they're following the area pretty closely, that they know that an event was planned for today, specifically about photographers' rights and being on the sidewalk. And I think that they were circling to make their presence known.
Do you agree that by their actions today and last week, they seem to know that they're in the wrong because they were not behaving in the same way that they were last week? There is a difference.
I think there is a difference. I don't know if that's because everybody got called on the carpet Monday afternoon. I think they certainly know now. It's certainly clear that their behavior has changed.
What are the police officers' rights? How much do we have to cooperate with them when they're asking us things like to give up our cameras or to show ID when we believe we're in our rights, standing on the sidewalk and just taking pictures?
Standing on the sidewalk, taking pictures. In that situation, the police do have the right to stop a citizen and ask them questions. What becomes less clear is how long they detain you, what they ask you, if it seems reasonable. And this is the area that I know a little bit less about. My brother's a lawyer, so I can ask him questions, but I don't want to mislead anyone. I'm not actually a lawyer. There are things like you don't have to, when they start asking to go through your belongings, that becomes a search, and that is something that's protected by the Fourth Amendment. As far as ID goes, there is some debate about, and I'm not entirely clear at the point at which you do have to show them ID. A gentleman today was saying that you don't have to show them ID, and you don't actually have to turn over your ID until you are actually arrested. But in the way that, in real world terms, if you don't give your ID, your chances of being arrested are much higher. I actually don't have a problem with giving them my ID. Which you did, and they ran a background check on you. Yeah, but I can understand definitely, I can understand situations in which, if you were stopped for being on the sidewalk and that might turn into a parole violation for you, that would be a terrible situation. That's a situation in which, you would have very valid reason not to give them your ID. So did you file a complaint with the Civilian Complaint Review Board? I'm a little confused about that, actually, and I need to find out more about it, because my understanding was the Civilian Complaint Review Board didn't cover the MTA Police. So I'm a little confused about where I need to go to file this complaint. That's another good point, because we're not even talking about NYPD here. We're talking about MTA Police. So do MTA Police have the right to stop folks in the same manner that, NYPD does? So it's something we need to look into as well, and we will. And, my suggestion, though, to everybody out there is when you do have an encounter such as this is go to the Civilian Complaint Review Board, go online, we'll give you the website address, and, file a complaint, because the more people speak out about this, the more chances we have to rectify, this type of behavior. That's really a good point. And one incident might be an isolated incident, might be an officer who wasn't clear on the rules. 3 incidents, 5 incidents, 10 incidents, that's a pattern, that's a problem, and that's something that we can assume is coming from higher. That's not just one rogue cop, one bad apple. So that is really important. Here we are.
At Freddie's back room, surprise, surprise. Freddie's Brooklyn Roundhouse. And we're here with Amy and Lumi from No Land Grab. And we're talking today about video, surveillance in and out of the footprint, and what goes on being a photographer or a videographer around here. Amy, you do a lot of the photographs for No Land Grab, right?
Mm-hmm. Since the beginning, pretty much focused on photography around here. And some of the first things I did were to go over to Metrotech to try to take the comparison pictures of how Metrotech compares to Fulton Street as far as activity. And the little Ratner renter cops would come out of their little booths and say immediately, you can't take photographs here, and or just nod and pretend I don't speak English, nodding like this, and just keep taking pictures. But that was the first kind of experience with the Ratner cops telling us we couldn't exercise our civil liberties on public property. But then with anti-Ratner Christmas caroling, that was on a public sidewalk in front of the Ratner Atlantic Center Mall, and they told us we couldn't A, stand on the sidewalk and carol, B, videotape on the sidewalk, which is a public sidewalk, and also to hand out flyers to people walking by. So the Ratner renter cops came out and tried to, trying to take the cameras, trying to make us stop singing, and also they actually physically ripped the papers out of people's hands that we had handed out as flyers. So we explained that that was illegal, and they finally did, the cops came, and obviously what we were doing was legal and what they were doing was not, but nothing really too much came of it. But
well, what did we do with it? We put it on YouTube, right? So it's like, there you go.
On the 11th day of Christmas, this letter took from me. 11 blocks of sidewalks, 10 acres, people 9, cultures mixing 8, unblocked subway.
Oh, you go across the street.
No, it's a public street.
You go across the street, though, sir.
No, it's not true. What you're doing is illegal.
It got a lot of coverage on YouTube, but it just shows that they just don't have a lot of respect for civil liberties, which is
or any understanding of the law.
Yeah.
Wait, so the cops bailed you out from the Ratner renter cops, though? That's pretty
They kind of did. I mean, they just they didn't necessarily say, oh, you guys are right, and these guys need to stop, but just them showing up, the Ratner cops backed off a little bit.
Yeah. So the Ratner cops, they knew that what they were doing was probably more towards harassment than exercising Ratner's rights to be a mall, to own malls and run and operate a business there.
I think so, just because they had really crossed the line by pulling things out of people's hands, and it was, and we had it all on video. And they hadn't erased our video yet when they made us stop. So
I wanted to be on record that I wanted you guys to stop singing, but not for different reasons than Ratner wanted you guys to stop singing. Okay. Yeah.
Catherine McGinnis, you're a video art teacher from California, and can you teach us a little bit about what our rights are as photographers?
Well, the general rule of thumb is where you're standing, where your feet are, determines what your rights are and what your responsibilities are. And so if you are specifically on the sidewalk is a protected space. You have your rights on the sidewalk are limited only when you are, when you're blocking the way, or if you're, say, on the sidewalk but peering into a women's restroom or a men's restroom or something where people have a reasonable expectation of privacy. But other than that, on the sidewalk, your rights are pretty clearly defined, and you really do have the right on the sidewalk to shoot pretty much anything you can see, with the exception of privacy and very clear security places that would be security issues. You do have the right to film police officers, even in New York, while you're standing on the sidewalk. You do have the right to take photographs of buildings or people passing by. Those are definitely within your rights.
For information on photographers' rights, go to www.courageous.com/thephotographers-right.pdf. Confrontations that impair the constitutional right to make images are becoming more common. To fight the abuse of your right to free expression, you need to know your rights to photograph and the remedies available if your rights are infringed. The general rule in the United States is that anyone may take photographs of whatever they want when they are in a public place or places where they have permission to take photographs. Examples of places that are traditionally considered public are streets, sidewalks, and public parks. Most confrontations are started by security guards and employees of organizations who fear photography. The most common reason given is security, but often such persons have no articulated reason. Security is rarely a legitimate reason for restricting photography. Taking a photograph is not a terrorist act, nor can a business legitimately assert that taking a photograph of a subject in public view infringes on its trade secrets. If the conduct goes beyond questioning, all states have laws that make coercion and harassment criminal offenses. To learn more about the Mayor's Office on Film, Theater, and Broadcasting's current proposals for photography and filming rules in the city and to protect your First Amendment rights, go to www.pictureny.org. You can file complaints against NYPD officers at the Civilian Complaint Review Board. The New York City Civilian Complaint Review Board is an independent and non-police mayoral agency. It is empowered to receive, investigate, hear, make findings, and recommend action on complaints against New York City police officers which allege the use of excessive or unnecessary force, abuse of authority, discourtesy, or the use of offensive language. To file a complaint against the NYPD or an individual officer, call the CCRB hotline at any time. Dial 311. Or file in person at 40 Rector Street, 2nd floor, Manhattan, Monday through Friday, 8 to 6 p.m. Or file online at www.nyc.gov/html/CCRB. You can also write a letter to CCRB, 40 Rector Street, 2nd floor, Manhattan.
Freddy's Brooklyn Roundhouse, where we turn the train around. Oh, it's Freddy's Brooklyn Roundhouse.